The night Lyra Vane was publicly destroyed in front of 300 wolves, she made a choice that would shatter every rule the Iron Pelt frontier had ever known. What happens when the weakest becomes the most powerful? When rejection ignites a transformation so explosive it forces even kings to kneel. This is the story of a girl born empty in a world that worships strength, a healer dismissed, humiliated, and cast aside by the very man who promised her everything. But what lurked beneath her skin wasn't weakness. It was something ancient, something terrifying, something about to rewrite the fate of every wolf alive. Stay until the end. You won't believe what happens next. Drop your city in the comments and smash that like button. The bonfire roared against the winter sky, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness like dying stars. 300 wolves surrounded the sacred claiming ground, their eyes reflecting firelight, gold, amber, silver, all trained on the raised stone platform at the center of the Iron Pelt gathering. Lyra Vane stood at the edge of the crowd, her fingers twisted in the rough fabric of her healer's cloak. Her heart hammered so hard she thought the wolves nearest her might hear it, might scent the fear leaking from her pores like sweat. Tonight was the claiming moon. The night unmated wolves declared their bonds before the pack, binding themselves in ceremony and blood. For most, it was tradition. For Lyra, it was supposed to be salvation. "Move, orphan!" A shoulder slammed into her back, nearly knocking her into the mud. Laughter erupted behind her, sharp, cruel, familiar. She didn't turn around. There was no point. She'd learned years ago that responding only made it worse. "Careful," someone else sneered. "Might break her. She's got no wolf to heal those bones." More laughter. Always laughter. Lyra kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight. Let them talk. Let them mock. In a few minutes, none of it would matter. Kyle had promised. 3 months ago, under the silver birch grove, where no one else could hear, he'd held her face between his hands and sworn he would claim her tonight. That her lack of a wolf didn't matter, that he saw her worth. She'd believed him. She had to. Because if Kyle Thornridge, rising alpha, son of the pack's second, didn't want her, then no one ever would. Silence. The command cracked through the air like a whip. Alpha Garrick Thornridge stepped onto the platform, his massive frame outlined against the fire. Even in human form, he radiated dominance, the kind that made weaker wolves drop their eyes instinctively. His son stood beside him, tall and golden and perfect. Kyle. Lyra's breath caught. Even from this distance, he was beautiful. Sharp jawline, dark hair that always looked slightly too long, eyes that burned amber in the firelight. He wore the ceremonial leathers of an unmated alpha-to-be, his chest bare despite the cold, every muscle carved like he'd been designed to lead. She'd spent 2 years loving him in secret before he'd finally noticed her, before he'd started meeting her in the healing den after everyone else had left, before he'd kissed her against the stone wall and whispered that she was different, special. "Tonight," Alpha Garrick announced, his voice carrying across the gathered pack, "we honor the old ways, the claiming bonds that strengthen our bloodlines, our unity, our future." His gaze swept the crowd. "Step forward, those who would declare." Wolves began moving toward the platform. Lyra stayed frozen, her eyes locked on Kyle. He hadn't looked at her yet. He would, though. Any second now he'd scan the crowd, find her face, give her that small smile that meant soon. But Kyle's attention remained fixed straight ahead. "Lucas Brennan claims Saren Vale," Garrick intoned as a young warrior led his chosen mate onto the platform. The crowd howled approval. Blood was drawn, words spoken, the bond sealed with a kiss that made half the younger wolves whistle and shout. One by one, pairs stepped forward. Each time, Lyra's heart climbed higher in her throat. Each time, Kyle remained still. "He's waiting for the right moment," she whispered to herself, "making it special." "Pathetic," the word drifted from somewhere behind her, followed by barely suppressed giggles. Lyra's fingernails bit into her palms. "Ignore them. Just ignore them." Marcus Thorne claims Elira Shade. The ceremonies continued. The moon climbed higher. And still, Kyle didn't move. Lyra's chest began to tighten. Something felt wrong. The way he stood so rigid, his hands clasped behind his back like he was bracing for something. The way his father kept glancing at him, those quick, sharp looks that passed between them like a silent conversation. "Kyle Thornridge." Alpha Garrick's voice shifted, taking on weight, pride. Step forward. The crowd went utterly silent. This was it. Lyra's hand shook as she smoothed down her cloak, already stepping forward, ready to... I claim Sarah Blackwater. The words hit like a physical blow. Lyra stopped moving, stopped breathing. From the opposite side of the circle, a girl emerged. No, not a girl. A woman. Tall, curved, with dark hair that cascaded down her back, and a wolf so powerful you could feel it even when she was in human skin. Sarah Blackwater, daughter of the Northern Ridge Alpha. Beautiful. Connected. Everything Lyra wasn't. Sarah walked to the platform like she owned it, her hips swaying, her smile confident. When Kael took her hand, the crowd erupted in howls of approval. No. The word fell from Lyra's lips, barely a whisper. No, he promised. But Kael was already drawing the ceremonial blade across his palm, already pressing his bleeding hand to Sarah's, already speaking the words that would bind them. Lyra's vision blurred. Her lungs forgot how to pull air. Around her, wolves pressed closer to watch, jostling her, shoving her, completely unaware that the world had just ended. Or maybe they were aware. Maybe they'd known all along. Did you actually think? The voice in her ear was female, dripping with amusement. Did you seriously believe he'd claim you? Another voice, male this time. The orphan healer with no wolf? God, she really is that stupid. The laughter started again, spreading like infection through the wolves nearest her. But this time it was different, louder, meaner. Because now they had proof. Now they had confirmation that Lyra Vane was exactly what they'd always said. Nothing. On the platform, Kael sealed his bond with a kiss. Sarah melted into him, her arms around his neck, and the pack went wild with celebration. Lyra's legs moved on their own, carrying her backwards, away from the firelight, away from the howling and the joy and the brutal, crushing weight of betrayal. She stumbled over roots, crashed into bodies that cursed and shoved her aside. Wait! A hand grabbed her elbow. Hard. Where do you think you're going? Lyra spun. 3 girls blocked her path, pack females she recognized from the training grounds. The leader, a blonde named Mira, smiled like a predator. The ceremony's not over, Mira said sweetly. Don't you want to congratulate them? Let me go. Lyra tried to pull free. Mira's grip tightened. I heard a rumor, Mira continued, her voice rising, drawing attention. I heard our little healer thought she had a chance with Kael, that he'd been visiting her. More wolves turned to watch. The circle around Lyra began to close. That's... Lyra's voice cracked. That's not... Is it true? Another girl stepped closer, her eyes bright with malicious curiosity. Did you actually spread your legs for an alpha, thinking he'd claim you? Heat flooded Lyra's face. It wasn't like that. Oh, it wasn't? Mira's laugh was razor sharp. Then what was it like? Tell us. We're dying to know what a wolfless nothing could possibly offer someone like Kael Thornridge. The crowd pressed tighter. Faces swam in Lyra's vision, some curious, some disgusted, all entertained. This was sport to them. Blood sport without the blood. He said... Lyra hated how small her voice sounded. He told me I mattered. Silence. Then, the laughter exploded like thunder. It crashed over her from all sides, drowning out the bonfire's roar, drowning out everything except the horrible, inescapable truth that she'd been played, used, discarded. She actually believed him, someone shouted. Poor, stupid orphan. Did you think your herbs and bandages made you special? Mira leaned in close, her breath hot against Lyra's ear. He fucked you because you were convenient, because you were too pathetic to say no. That's all you were to him, a warm body when he was bored. Something inside Lyra cracked, not broke, not yet, but cracked, a hairline fracture in whatever had been holding her together. Move aside. The command came from behind her, cold and absolute. The crowd parted. Kael walked through, Sarah's hand still clasped in his expression unreadable in the firelight. He stopped 3 feet from Lyra, close enough that she could smell the ceremonial oils on his skin, the same oils she'd helped prepare in the healing den 2 days ago. She'd made the oils for her own claiming ceremony. The irony tasted like poison. Lyra. Kael's voice held no warmth, no recognition of what they'd shared. You need to stop this. Stop what? Her voice barely worked. This. He gestured vaguely at her, at the crowd, at everything. Whatever you think happened between us, it was a mistake. You misunderstood. The crack widened, deepened. You said you'd claim me. The words ripped out of her like broken glass. You promised. Cale's jaw tightened. For just a second, less than a second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? But it vanished so quickly, Lyra thought she'd imagined it. I was trying to be kind, he said flatly. You were always there, always underfoot, looking at me like... He stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter. You're wolfless, Lyra. Broken. Did you honestly think I could claim someone like you and maintain respect? Did you think my father would allow it? That the pack would accept it? Each word landed like a fist. Lyra swayed. I have a responsibility, Kyle continued. To my bloodline. To my future. Sarah is strong, connected, worthy of standing beside an alpha. His eyes hardened. You're a healer. That's all you'll ever be, and you should be grateful we even let you stay in the pack at all. Sarah smiled, actually smiled, her head tilted in mock sympathy. It must be difficult, she murmured, being so ordinary in a world that values strength. The wolves around them laughed again, but this time it sounded distant to Lyra, muffled, like she was hearing it from underwater. The crack in her chest split wider. Get out of my sight, Kael said. Not angry, just dismissive. Like she was a problem he'd finally solved. And for God's sake, have some dignity. He turned away, started walking back toward the platform, toward his new mate, toward his future that had no space for a broken girl who'd been stupid enough to believe in promises. And that's when it happened. The pain started in Lyra's chest, a burning, searing agony that stole her breath. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against a tree, gasping, her vision going white at the edges. What's wrong with her? Someone asked. Probably just dramatic, Mira snorted, looking for attention. But the pain was spreading, racing through Lyra's veins like liquid fire, filling every empty space inside her, every void where a wolf should have been. Her skin felt too tight. Her bones felt too small. She tried to speak, to call for help, but the only sound that emerged was a gasp that turned into something else. Something animal. The temperature around her dropped. Frost crept across the ground in spiraling patterns, spreading from where her hands pressed against the earth. The wolves nearest her took a step back, their laughter dying. Lyra! Kael's voice, uncertain now. She couldn't answer. The fire inside her was consuming everything. The pain, the humiliation, the years of being told she was nothing, the crushing weight of betrayal. It all burned together, melting down into something molten and raw and absolutely unstoppable. The world tilted. Lyra's back arched as her body began to change. Not shift. Wolves shifted smoothly, easily, their transformations as natural as breathing. This was different. This was violent. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles tore and rebuilt. Her scream turned into a howl that shattered the night. Light exploded from her skin. Not firelight. Not moonlight. Something else entirely. Silver white and blazing. So bright the wolves had to shield their eyes. When it faded, silence blanketed the clearing. Where Lyra had stood, a wolf now crouched. But calling it a wolf was like calling an inferno a candle flame. She was massive, easily twice the size of the largest alpha in the pack, with fur that shimmered like starlight, like liquid mercury, like every legend whispered around winter fires. Her eyes burned molten silver. Power rolled off her in waves that made the lesser wolves whimper and back away. The sacred claiming ground had gone graveyard quiet. Lyra's new form panted, steam rising from her muzzle in the winter air. She could feel everything now, every heartbeat in the clearing, every breath, every spike of fear from the wolves who'd been laughing at her seconds ago. The emptiness inside her was gone. In its place, something ancient and vast and absolutely terrifying had unfurled. She turned her massive head toward Kael. He stood frozen on the platform, his new bond forgotten, his face drained of color. Sarah had backed away from him, her mouth open in shock. Alpha Garrick stepped forward, his own wolf rising to the surface, responding to the challenge of an unknown power. What? His voice failed. What are you? Lyra didn't know how to answer. She didn't even know how to think in this new form, how to contain the sheer overwhelming force of what she'd become. All she knew was that every wolf in the clearing could feel it now, could feel the truth they'd been too blind to see. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She'd been something else entirely. A ripple moved through the crowd. Wolves parted, creating a path, though no one had given an order. The bonfire's flames bent sideways as if pushed by an unfelt wind. From the darkness beyond the tree line, a figure emerged. He walked like he owned not just the ground beneath his feet, but the air itself. Tall, broader than any Alpha Lyra had ever seen, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes that seemed to hold centuries. He wore no ceremonial leathers, just simple black that somehow looked more regal than any crown. Every wolf in the clearing, every single one, dropped to one knee. Not because they were ordered, because their bodies did it instinctively, responding to a dominance so absolute it bypassed conscious thought. Even Alpha Garrick knelt, even Kael. Everyone except Lyra. She remained standing, this massive silver wolf that shouldn't exist, and met the stranger's gaze across the clearing. He smiled, slow and knowing. "Ronan Virex," someone breathed. "The Alpha King." The title rippled through the crowd in terrified whispers. The Alpha King, ruler of the 5 territories, a legend made flesh. He walked through the kneeling wolves like they were furniture, his attention never leaving Lyra. When he reached the claiming platform, he stopped, tilted his head, and studied her with those ancient eyes. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "After all these years, I'd begun to think the bloodline had died out completely." Lyra's wolf growled low in her chest. She didn't know what he meant, didn't know why he was looking at her like she was a puzzle piece that had finally clicked into place. Ronan turned to address the gathered pack, his voice carrying effortlessly. "This wolf, this magnificent creature you've been mocking and dismissing, carries the blood of the first mothers, the celestial line. Do you understand what that means?" Silence. Blank stares. "It means," Ronan continued, his tone sharpening, "that she holds more power in one claw than your entire pack has in its collective bloodline. It means she's royalty. It means—" His gaze cut to Kyle, who'd gone gray as ash. "That rejecting her may have been the most catastrophically stupid decision any Alpha has made in the last 500 years. Sarah made a small, strangled sound. Kyle looked like he might vomit. Ronan turned back to Lyra, and his expression softened. "You've just awakened. I imagine it's overwhelming, terrifying even." He took a step closer. "But you're not broken, Lyra Vane. You never were. You were simply dormant, waiting for the right trigger." "Betrayal," Lyra's wolf whispered in her mind. "Pain, rage." "Yes," Ronan said, as if he'd heard her. "Those are powerful catalysts." He held her gaze for a long moment, then did something that made the entire pack gasp. The Alpha King knelt. Not the formal pack kneel, one knee down, but both knees, his head bowed, his hand extended. "I've been searching for someone like you for longer than you can imagine," he said quietly. "A partner, an equal, not a subordinate or a trophy or a political alliance." He lifted his eyes to hers. "I'm asking, Lyra Vane of the lost celestial bloodline, if you would consider bonding with me." The clearing exploded with shocked murmurs. This wasn't how claims happened. Kings didn't ask. They commanded. They took. But Ronan remained kneeling, his hand outstretched, waiting. Lyra's wolf studied him, searched for deception, for mockery, for any hint of the cruelty she'd just endured. But all she found was sincerity, respect, recognition. He saw her, not as a broken healer, not as a convenient body, but as something powerful and rare and worthy. The part of her that was still human, still reeling from Kael's betrayal, screamed at her to be cautious, to protect herself, to never trust again. But the wolf knew better. The wolf understood that this moment, this choice, would define everything that came next. Behind Ronan, Kael had risen from his kneel, his face twisted with something between horror and desperate calculation. "Wait," he started. "I didn't know. I couldn't have—" "Silence," Ronan said without looking at him. "Your time to speak has long passed." Lyra's massive silver form took a single step forward, then another. The ground seemed to hum beneath her paws, responding to the power now fully awakened in her veins. She reached Ronan, lowered her head, and placed her muzzle against his outstretched palm. The bond ignited like lightning. Lyra felt it slam through her, connecting to something equally vast in Ronan. Two ancient forces recognizing each other and locking together with a finality that transcended choice. Her vision went white. Her howl merged with his, creating a sound that shook the trees and sent every lesser wolf cringing. When the light faded, Lyra stood in human form again, but changed. Her skin seemed to glow from within. Her eyes had retained that molten silver. And around her neck, a silver mark had appeared, intricate and beautiful, the visible sign of a king's bond. Ronan rose, his own mark mirroring hers. He smiled, fierce and proud. "My queen." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war, because that's what they were. Lyra turned to face the pack that had rejected her. 300 wolves stared back, their expressions ranging from shock to fear to naked envy. She found Kyle in the crowd, saw the devastation in his eyes, the horrible realization of what he'd thrown away. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to make him suffer the way she'd suffered. But as she stood there, bonded to a king, her true nature finally revealed, she realized something profound. Cale Thornridge was beneath her now. They all were. "We're leaving," Ronan said, his hand finding hers. "You belong to a different world now, my queen, one that will value you properly." Lyra looked at the bonfire still burning, at the claiming ground where she'd been destroyed and reborn, at Mira, who wouldn't meet her eyes, at Sarah, who'd backed against Kyle like she could hide behind him, at Kyle himself, standing there with his perfect new bond and his shattered pride. She could stay, could make them all pay, could burn this place to the ground with the power now singing in her veins. But that would mean staying in their world, staying small. And Lyra Vane had been small for far too long. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying across the silent clearing. "Let's go." She walked away from the iron pelt pack without looking back, her hand in Ronan's, her head high. Behind her, she heard Kyle make a broken sound, heard someone start crying, heard the frantic whispers as 300 wolves tried to process what they'd just witnessed. The girl they'd called nothing had just become someone they could never touch again. And the best part? She was only beginning to understand what that meant. The compound rose from the mountain like something carved from nightmare and ambition. Black stone towers twisted toward a sky still dark with pre-dawn, connected by bridges that seemed too delicate to hold weight, but hummed with ancient power. Lyra had never seen anything like it. The Iron Pelt territory had been rough timber and packed earth, functional, brutal, honest in its simplicity. This place was something else entirely. "Welcome to Shadow Peak," Ronan said as their vehicle, sleek, silent, nothing like the rusted trucks back home, glided through gates that opened without anyone touching them. The seat of the 5 territories. Lyra pressed her hand against the window, watching wolves move through courtyards below. Even from this distance, she could feel their power. These weren't ordinary pack wolves. These were warriors, diplomats, elites whose weakest member could probably tear through Iron Pelt's best fighters without breaking a sweat. "How many live here?" Her voice sounded small in the vehicle's leather interior. "Permanently? About 800. But we host rotating delegations from all 5 territories, plus visiting alphas, their entourages, trade representatives." Ronan leaned back, studying her face. On any given day, there might be 1,500 wolves inside these walls. 1,500. Lyra's stomach twisted. That was more wolves than she'd seen in her entire life combined. "You're afraid," Ronan observed. Not mocking, just stating fact. Lyra stopped. Tried again. 3 hours ago, I was a healer. Now I'm supposedly a queen. I don't even know what that means." "It means you're mine." His voice dropped, taking on an edge that made her pulse quicken. "And I protect what's mine." The vehicle stopped before a tower that made the others look small. Doors opened, not by guards, but by themselves, responding to Ronan's presence like the gates had. He stepped out, then offered his hand. Lyra took it. The bond between them flared at the contact, warm and undeniable. She'd felt it during the entire 3-hour drive from Iron Pelt, this connection that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. letting her sense his moods, his thoughts, when he let them drift close enough. Right now, he was amused. And something else, curious maybe, watching her like she was a puzzle he genuinely wanted to solve rather than a problem he needed to manage. "Come," he said, "let's get you settled before the vultures descend." "Vultures?" His smile went sharp. "You bonded an unmated king. Every alpha family with an eligible daughter just felt their political plans collapse. They're going to want to see what destroyed their ambitions." They walked through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings. Tapestries depicting battles Lyra didn't recognize. Wolves in formal dress who stopped and bowed as Ronan passed, their eyes cutting to Lyra with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. No one spoke to her directly. No one dared. "This is the Queen's Wing," Ronan said, stopping before a set of double doors carved with intricate patterns that seemed to move in the torchlight. "It's been empty for 12 years, since my mother passed." The doors opened into a suite that made Lyra's breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mountains, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums, a bed large enough to sleep 5 people comfortably. Everything gleamed with the kind of wealth that had never needed to announce itself. "I'll have servants bring clothes," Ronan continued. "Food. Whatever you need." "I need—" Lyra turned to face him. "I need to understand what just happened, what I am. You said celestial bloodline, but I don't even know what that means." Ronan moved to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he just stood there, silhouetted against the lightening sky. "The celestial wolves were the first," he said finally. "Before territories, before politics, before the bloodlines fractured into 1,000 different packs. They were pure power, connected directly to the oldest forces. Most died out centuries ago, hunted by jealous alphas who feared what they couldn't control. The last known celestial was killed 90 years before I was born. But I'm alive. Yes." He turned to look at her, "which means somewhere in your lineage, someone hid, someone survived, and their blood ran dormant in your veins until tonight." Lyra sank onto the edge of the massive bed. "Kael said I was broken. Kael is an idiot who wouldn't recognize true power if it tore his throat out." Ronan's voice held nothing but contempt. He saw a girl without an obvious wolf and assumed weakness. He never looked deeper. "Did you?" The question escaped before Lyra could stop it. "Look deeper, I mean. Or did you just see a bloodline you could use?" Silence fell between them, heavy and dangerous. Ronan's eyes darkened. For just a second, Lyra remembered that she was talking to the most powerful alpha alive, someone who could crush her without effort, despite her newfound power. Then he smiled. Actually smiled, like she'd surprised him. "Fair question," he said. Honest answer? Both. I saw the celestial power the moment you transformed. It's unmistakable, intoxicating. Yes, bonding you strengthens my position significantly." He moved closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I also saw a woman who'd been beaten down her entire life finally bare her teeth, who stood alone against an entire pack's mockery and didn't break. That interested me more than the bloodline." "Why?" "Because power without spine is useless, and spine without power gets you killed." He sat beside her on the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You have both now. The question is what you'll do with them." Before Lyra could answer, a sharp knock interrupted them. "Enter," Ronan called, his tone shifting to something colder. The door opened. A woman walked in. Tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could freeze oceans. She wore formal robes marked with symbols Lyra didn't recognize, and her wolf was so controlled Lyra almost couldn't sense it. "My king." The woman's bow was precise, calculated. "I heard we have a new queen." "Lyra, this is Vera Ashcroft, my chief advisor." Ronan's voice held a warning Lyra couldn't quite interpret. "Vera, meet Queen Lyra Vane." Vera's smile was thin as a knife blade. "How unexpected. I wasn't aware you were attending claiming ceremonies in the frontier territories." "I wasn't planning to." Ronan stood, moving to put himself slightly between Lyra and Vera, but I felt a surge of celestial power and investigated. "Celestial." Vera's eyes cut to Lyra. "How fortunate." And how remarkably convenient, finding such a rare bloodline just when the council has been pressuring you to secure an heir. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lyra watched Ronan's jaw tighten, saw the flicker of anger in his eyes. "Careful, Vera." "Of course, my king." But Vera's attention remained fixed on Lyra, assessing her like a merchant evaluating questionable goods. "Forgive my bluntness, but the court will have questions. Where exactly did you come from, girl?" "Iron Pelt territory," Lyra said, forcing her voice steady. "I'm a healer." "A healer?" Vera's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How modest. And your parents? Your lineage?" "Unknown. I was found as an infant." "How convenient," Vera repeated. "No family, no history, no one to verify your claims." "I'm not claiming anything," Lyra shot back, anger flaring. "I didn't even know what I was until tonight. And yet here you are, bonded to a king within hours of your so-called awakening." Vera turned to Ronan. "You must understand how this appears. A mysterious girl with no background suddenly reveals unprecedented power at precisely the right moment. The council will suspect manipulation, deception." "The council can suspect whatever they like," Ronan said flatly. "The bond is sealed. Lyra is my queen." "Is she, though?" Vera moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. "My king, you're not thinking clearly. The celestial blood may be real. I don't doubt what you felt. But this girl is completely unprepared for court life. She has no training, no polish, no understanding of our politics. The moment you present her to the council, they'll tear her apart." Lyra's hands clenched in her lap. Because Vera wasn't wrong. She had no idea how to navigate this world. 3 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she'd gathered enough willow bark for winter. Now she was supposed to be a queen? "Then she'll learn," Ronan said. "Will she?" Vera's tone sharpened. "In 3 days? Because that's how long you have before the gathering. Every alpha in the 5 territories will be here, expecting to meet their new queen, expecting her to prove she's worthy of standing beside you." 3 days? Lyra's voice came out strangled. Vera's smile turned pitying. "The summer gathering, it's been scheduled for months." "You didn't know?" She glanced at Ronan. "Of course you didn't. Because this bond happened so fast, there was no time for preparation. No time for her to learn even the basics of court etiquette." "Enough," Ronan growled. "I'm trying to help." Vera spread her hands. "The council already questions your judgment, my king. They say you're too young, too volatile. If you present them with an unprepared frontier girl as their queen—" "I said enough!" The command cracked through the air like thunder. Vera went silent, though her expression remained carefully neutral. Ronan took a breath, clearly fighting for control. "Lyra is my bonded queen. That makes her worthy. If the council has a problem with it, they can address their concerns to me directly." "As you wish, my king." Vera bowed again. "I'll inform the court of her arrival and begin preparations for the gathering." She paused at the door. "I do hope you know what you're doing." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like a threat. Lyra sat frozen, her earlier confidence crumbling. 3 days. 3 days to transform from a frontier healer into someone who could stand before the most powerful alphas alive and not be destroyed. "She's wrong," Ronan said quietly. "Is she?" Lyra looked up at him. "Because from where I'm sitting, she made a lot of sense. I don't know anything about your world. I'm going to embarrass you. You're going to surprise them." He moved to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. Vera's brilliant, but she's also a politician. She sees vulnerability and immediately thinks of how it can be exploited. What she doesn't understand is that your lack of polish is exactly why you'll succeed. That makes no sense. The court is full of wolves who've spent their entire lives learning to smile while plotting murders. They're polished until they shine, and underneath, they're all monsters." His grip tightened. "You're different. You're real. And that authenticity, combined with your power, will terrify them more than any amount of political maneuvering ever could." Lyra wanted to believe him, but doubt crawled through her chest like ice water. "What if I can't do this?" she whispered. "Then we'll fail together." Ronan's smile was fierce. "But I don't think you will. You survived being wolfless in a pack that values nothing but strength. You endured years of mockery and still maintained your compassion. I saw the healing den, Lyra. I saw how carefully you'd organized your supplies, how many notes you'd made about pack members' individual needs. You're not weak. You've never been weak. You've been fighting a war no one else could see. Something in Lyra's chest loosened. Not completely. The fear was still there, cold and heavy. But Ronan's words carved out a small space where maybe, just maybe, she could believe in herself. 3 days, she said. 3 days, he agreed. Think you can handle it? Before Lyra could answer, the door burst open. No knock this time. A young man strode in, tall, dark-haired, with Ronan's eyes and a grin that probably got him into constant trouble. Is it true? He demanded. You actually bonded someone? Marcus. Ronan stood, his tone caught between affection and exasperation. What happened to knocking? What happened to telling your brother you were getting mated? Marcus shot back. Then his eyes found Lyra, and his expression shifted to open curiosity. Damn, she's real. Lyra, my younger brother, Marcus Virex. Ronan gestured between them. Marcus, my queen. Try not to embarrass me. Marcus moved closer, circling Lyra like she was a particularly interesting specimen. She fought the urge to bare her teeth. I can feel it, Marcus murmured. The power. It's like standing next to a storm. He stopped in front of her, his grin returning. The whole compound's buzzing. Half the court thinks you're a political plant. The other half thinks Ronan's finally lost his mind. Marcus, what? I'm just telling her what she's walking into. Marcus dropped onto the sofa across from them, completely at ease in a way that made Lyra simultaneously jealous and wary. You need to know the court's already sharpening their knives, especially the Ashcroft faction. Vera, Lyra said. Vera's the civilized face. Her nephew Damien is the real problem. Marcus's expression darkened. He's been positioning himself as Ronan's likely successor since our father died. Your arrival just destroyed a decade of careful planning. Ronan moved to the window again, his shoulders tight. Damien will adapt or be removed. He'll fight, Marcus said flatly. You know he will. The question is whether he'll do it openly or through proxies. Let him try. The casual violence in Ronan's voice sent a chill down Lyra's spine. This was a side of him she hadn't seen yet, the king who ruled through fear as much as respect. Marcus noticed her reaction and laughed. Don't worry, he's not actually going to murder anyone. Probably. He leaned forward. So what's your story? How does a frontier healer end up bonded to the most eligible bachelor in 5 territories? I'm sitting right here, Ronan muttered. Which is why I'm asking her instead of you. You'll just give me the boring political version. Marcus's eyes glinted with mischief. Come on, what really happened? Lyra found herself talking. Maybe it was Marcus's easy manner, or maybe she just needed to tell someone who wasn't analyzing her every word for weakness. She told him about Kyle, about the rejection, about the transformation that had torn through her when she'd finally broken. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing progressively darker. What an asshole, he said when she finished. Marcus, Ronan warned. What? He is. He had something real and threw it away for a political alliance. Marcus shook his head. Bet he's regretting it now. I don't care if he regrets it. The words surprised Lyra, but they were true. He made his choice. And you made yours. Marcus's grin returned. Good. The court needs someone with teeth. He stood, stretching. Fair warning, the next few days are going to be brutal, but if you survive them, you'll be untouchable. Comforting, Lyra said dryly. I try. He headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think Ronan chose well. You've got fire in you. The court hasn't seen real fire in a long time. After he left, silence filled the room. Lyra stood, moving to the windows where Ronan still stood. The sun had fully risen now, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Your brother seems nice, she said. He's a menace. But Ronan's voice held affection. Also one of the few people in this compound I completely trust. And the others? Are necessary evils. He glanced at her. Welcome to politics. A knock, proper this time, interrupted them. At Ronan's word, a young woman entered, her arms full of clothing. Your Majesty, she said, bowing to Lyra with wide, nervous eyes. I'm Mira. She stopped, flushed. I mean, not that Mira, a different Mira. I'm your lady's maid. I've brought clothes and, if you need anything, thank you, Lyra said, taking pity on the girl's obvious terror. The clothes are fine. The maid, this new, different Mira, set the garments down with trembling hands and fled. Ronan chuckled. You're already terrifying the staff. I didn't do anything. You exist. You're bonded to me. That's enough. He moved toward the door. I'll leave you to rest. We'll talk more this evening. Ronan. Lyra stopped him before he could leave. Why did you really bond me? And don't give me the political answer, the real reason. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, because when you stood in that clearing, surrounded by wolves who'd spent years crushing you, and instead of running or begging, you transformed into something that made them all afraid. I recognized you. Recognized me as someone like me. His smile was sharp and sad all at once. Someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated, to have everyone assume they know your limits. I've been king since I was 19, Lyra. 19. And every day since, someone has told me I'm too young, too reckless, too emotional to rule effectively. They're waiting for me to fail, just like your pack was waiting for you to break. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. So when I saw you rise instead of break, when I felt that celestial power and realized what you were, yes, I saw a political advantage, but I also saw a chance to have someone beside me who actually understands, who won't spend every moment trying to manage me or soften me or turn me into something safer. Lyra's breath caught, because she did understand, understood what it meant to be judged before you even opened your mouth, to have your worth determined by factors you couldn't control. 3 days, she said again. 3 days, Ronan confirmed. Can you be ready? Lyra thought about Kale's face when she'd walked away. Thought about Vera's calculating eyes in the court waiting to tear her apart. Thought about every wolf who'd ever called her weak or broken or nothing. I can be ready, she said. And this time, she meant it. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like torture. Lyra learned to walk in formal gowns that weighed more than she did, learned the hierarchy of the 5 territories, and which alphas hated, which others, and why. Learned court etiquette that made her head spin. Who to bow to. Who to acknowledge with a nod. Who could be safely ignored without causing political incident. Vera supervised most of it, her criticisms precise and cutting. Your posture is appalling. You're mumbling. Queens don't mumble. That dress makes you look like a child playing pretend. Lyra endured it because she didn't have a choice, but with each passing hour, her resentment built. This wasn't preparation. This was an attempt to break her, to prove she didn't belong. On the second day, she snapped. Enough, she said, cutting off Vera mid-lecture about proper wine-holding technique. I'm not going to become you. Vera's eyes went cold. Excuse me? You're trying to turn me into a perfect court doll, polished and empty and safe. Lyra stood, facing the older woman directly. That's not who Ronan bonded. That's not who I am. What you are, Vera said icily, is a frontier healer with delusions of adequacy. The only reason you're standing here is genetic accident and my king's temporary fascination. But biology and infatuation aren't enough to rule. I need to be myself. Lyra's wolf pushed against her skin, responding to the challenge. Ronan was right. You're so busy thinking about how I can be exploited, you can't see that maybe my authenticity is exactly what the court needs. The court will eat you alive. Maybe, Lyra smiled without humor, or maybe I'll surprise you. Vera studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. There, she said. That's the first interesting thing you've done since you arrived. Her expression remained severe, but something had shifted. Fine. Be authentic, be yourself. But understand that the moment you step into that gathering, every alpha in 5 territories will be searching for weakness. And if they find it, they'll use it to undermine Ronan's authority. Then I won't let them find it, Lyra said. The third day arrived faster than Lyra wanted. She stood in her chambers, staring at herself in the mirror while the new Mira fastened the final clasps of her gown. The dress was deep silver, the color of her wolf, of the celestial blood that ran in her veins. It fit like it had been made for her, because it had. created overnight by seamstresses who'd worked in terrified silence. The neckline showed the bonding mark at her throat, and her hair had been swept up in a style that somehow made her look older, more regal. She looked like a queen. She felt like an imposter. "You're beautiful, Your Majesty," Mira whispered. "I'm terrified," Lyra admitted. "That's just intelligence." The voice came from the doorway. Marcus leaned against the frame, dressed in formal leathers that made him look dangerous despite his easy smile. Anyone who isn't scared before their first gathering is either stupid or suicidal. "Not helping," Lyra muttered. "Sure I am. I'm lowering your expectations." He moved into the room, Mira scurrying out at his approach. "But seriously, you've got this. Just remember, half of politics is confidence. The other half is making everyone else think you know something they don't." "What's the actual truth? Nobody knows anything. We're all making it up as we go." His grin flashed. "But the ones who survive are the ones who commit to the act." Another knock. Ronan entered and Lyra's breath caught. She'd seen him in casual clothes and travel gear, even in the ceremonial leathers from the claiming. But this was different. He wore full royal regalia, black and silver, with the crown of the 5 territories resting on his dark hair. He looked every inch a king. His eyes found hers, and something flickered in their depths. "Perfect," he said quietly. Marcus cleared his throat. "I'll just be elsewhere." After he left, Ronan moved closer, his gaze never leaving Lyra's face. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to walk into a nest of vipers." "You are." He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "But you're not alone. Whatever happens in that hall, I'm beside you." "They're going to challenge me," Lyra said. "Vera's right about that." "Let them." Ronan's smile turned predatory. "Watching you shut them down will be the highlight of my year." Despite her fear, Lyra laughed. "You have that much faith in me? I bonded you, didn't I?" They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, passing wolves who stopped and bowed and whispered as they passed. Lyra kept her head high, her hand in Ronan's, drawing strength from the bond that pulsed between them. The gathering hall doors towered above them, carved wood and iron, inscribed with symbols of all 5 territories. Through them, Lyra could hear voices, hundreds of them, creating a wall of sound that made her stomach twist. "Ready?" Ronan asked. "No," Lyra thought, but she said, "Yes." The doors opened. The hall fell silent. Every eye in the massive chamber turned to watch as Ronan Virex and his new queen entered. Lyra saw the faces, some curious, some hostile, some carefully blank. She saw the alphas gathered in their territorial clusters, their postures radiating power and suspicion. Saw Vera standing near the front, her expression unreadable. And in the back, barely visible through the crowd, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Kael. Standing with a small delegation from the frontier territories, his face white with shock. He'd come. Despite being publicly humiliated, despite losing her, he'd actually come to see her coronation. Their eyes met across the hall. Lyra saw desperation in his gaze, saw him start to move forward. "Queen Lyra Vane!" Ronan's voice rang out, formal and absolute. "My bonded mate, celestial blood, your queen." The hall erupted, not in celebration, in chaos. "Impossible!" someone shouted. "The celestial line is extinct! This is a fraud!" Ronan's power slammed outward, forcing every wolf in the hall to their knees. All except Lyra, who stood beside him, her own power rising to meet his, 2 storms recognizing each other. "Anyone who questions my queen's legitimacy," Ronan said softly, his voice somehow carrying over the sudden silence, "is welcome to challenge her directly." A figure stepped forward from the crowd, tall, blonde, with eyes like chipped ice. Damien Ashcroft. "I accept that challenge," he said, and smiled. The hall stayed frozen. Every wolf remained on their knees except Damien, who stood with that ice-chipped smile like he'd just won something. Lyra felt Ronan tense beside her, felt the bond between them crackle with sudden violent energy. "No," Ronan said, his voice dropping to something deadly. "The law is clear, my king." Damien's tone was respectful, but his eyes gleamed with malice. "Any wolf may challenge a new queen to prove her worth. It's tradition. Surely you haven't forgotten." The tradition applies to political bonds, Ronan growled, not true mate bonds. Does it? Damien tilted his head. Because I seem to recall the law makes no such distinction. A queen must prove herself capable of standing beside the king, especially one who appears so conveniently. Murmurs rippled through the kneeling wolves. Lyra caught fragments. He's right. The law doesn't specify. This could be legitimate. You're making a mistake, Ronan said softly. Am I? Damien's smile widened. I'm simply following the old ways, unless your new queen is afraid to defend her claim. The trap was perfect. If Lyra refused, she'd look weak, cowardly, confirming every suspicion that she was a fraud. If she accepted, she'd be fighting an alpha who'd been training for combat since before she was born. Either way, Damien won. Lyra stepped forward before Ronan could stop her. I accept. The hall exploded with noise. Ronan grabbed her arm, spinning her to face him. You don't have to do this, he said, low enough that only she could hear. I can shut this down. Send Damien back to his territory in pieces. And then what? Lyra met his eyes. They'll always question whether I earned this. Whether I deserve to stand beside you. This ends now. He'll try to kill you. Then I'll have to make sure he doesn't succeed. Something flickered in Ronan's expression. Fear, maybe, or pride, or both tangled together. You're sure? No. Lyra's laugh came out shaky. But I'm doing it anyway. Ronan held her gaze for another heartbeat, then nodded once. He released her arm and turned to address the hall. The challenge is accepted. We fight at moonrise in the court arena. Standard rules. No interference, no weapons. Fight until submission or death. Perfect, Damien said. I look forward to seeing what our new queen is truly made of. The crowd began rising, their voices creating a wall of sound. Excitement, speculation, bloodlust. Lyra caught sight of Kyle again, still standing in the back, his face twisted with something that might have been horror or regret. She looked away. He didn't matter anymore. Marcus appeared at her elbow as Ronan led her from the hall. Are you insane? He hissed. Damien's undefeated in formal combat. He's killed 3 challengers. I noticed you didn't mention that earlier, Lyra said. I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to accept a death match within 3 days of arriving. Marcus, Ronan's voice cut like a blade. Not helping. They reached a private chamber off the main hall. The moment the door closed, Ronan rounded on her. Tell me you have a plan. I transform into my wolf and tear his throat out? Lyra tried for humor, but it fell flat. He'll be expecting that. He studied celestial wolves. What little information exists about them, he'll have strategies. Then I'll improvise. Improvisation gets you killed. Ronan slammed his hand against the wall, the stone cracking under the impact. Do you understand what you've just agreed to? Damien doesn't want to prove you're weak. He wants to execute you in front of every alpha in 5 territories and make me watch. The raw fear in his voice stopped Lyra cold. She'd been so focused on her own terror, her own need to prove herself, that she hadn't considered what this meant for him. 3 days bonded, and now he might lose her to political maneuvering disguised as tradition. I'm sorry, she said quietly, but I meant what I said. If I back down now, I'll never be anything but the frontier girl who got lucky. They'll undermine every decision I make, question every word I speak. This is the only way. Ronan stared at her, his jaw working. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. Don't die, he said against her hair. Please, don't die. Lyra held him back, drawing comfort from his solid presence, from the bond that pulsed between them like a second heartbeat. I'll try really hard not to. A knock interrupted them. Vera entered without waiting for permission, her expression grim. We have 4 hours until moonrise, she said. If you're determined to go through with this suicide, we need to prepare. The next hours blurred together. Vera drilled her on combat stances, on reading an opponent's tells, on the arena's layout and how to use it. Marcus demonstrated dirty fighting techniques that made Ronan wince. Even the staff seemed to be conspiring to help. Mira brought food Lyra couldn't eat, and guards she'd never met offered advice about Damien's fighting style. He favors his left side, one said. Goes for the throat early, another added. Tries to end it fast. Don't let him get behind you. He's vicious from behind. Lyra absorbed it all, trying to quiet the panic clawing at her chest. Her celestial wolf was powerful. She'd felt that during the transformation. But she had no idea how to actually fight. All her training had been in healing, in keeping wolves alive, not in killing them. The sun crawled toward the horizon with cruel slowness. When it finally touched the mountains, turning the sky blood red, Vera stepped back. "That's all we can do," she said. "The rest is up to you." Lyra changed into fighting leathers, supple, dark, designed for movement. No armor. Armor was considered an insult in formal challenges, an admission that you expected to be hit. She braided her hair back, checked that her joints moved freely, tried to remember even a fraction of what she'd been taught. "Lyra." Ronan appeared in the doorway. He'd changed too, wearing the formal robes of a king observing a challenge. His face looked carved from stone. "It's time." They walked to the arena in silence. The crowd had already gathered, hundreds of wolves packed into the tiered seating that surrounded a circular pit carved from black stone. Torches blazed around the perimeter, casting flickering shadows that made the space feel alive, hungry. Damien waited in the center, stripped to the waist, his muscles gleaming with oil. He looked like violence given form, every line of his body honed for destruction. When he saw Lyra, he grinned. "Last chance to withdraw," he called. "I promise to make your death quick if you kneel now." Lyra jumped down into the pit. The stone was rough under her feet, still warm from the day's heat. "I'm not much for kneeling." "Pity." Damien began circling. "You'll learn before this is over." Ronan took his place in the king's box, his hands gripping the railing so hard the wood groaned. Marcus sat beside him, looking sick. Vera watched with cold calculation, like she was already composing the announcement of Lyra's death. In the crowd, Lyra spotted Kael. He'd pushed to the front, his face anguished. Their eyes met for just a second. She wondered what he saw, the girl he'd rejected, about to die proving she was worth something, or something else entirely. Then the horn blew, and there was no more time for wondering. Damien lunged, fast, faster than Lyra expected. She barely dodged, his claws raking through empty air where her throat had been. She rolled, came up in a crouch, her wolf surging toward the surface. "Too slow!" Damien taunted. He attacked again, a combination of strikes that forced Lyra back toward the arena wall. "Is this really the best the celestial bloodline can offer?" Lyra's wolf broke free. The transformation was smoother this time, less painful, her body remembering the shape it was meant to hold. Silver light blazed as she shifted into the massive form, power flooding her veins. The crowd gasped. Even having heard about it, seeing a celestial wolf in the flesh made them recoil. Lyra towered over Damien's human form, her eyes burning molten silver, frost spreading from her paws. "Impressive," Damien said. Then he transformed. His wolf was huge, built like a tank, with dark fur and scars that told stories of 100 fights. He was easily twice the size of a normal alpha wolf. But Lyra was still larger. They collided in the center of the arena like two storms crashing together. Claws met flesh, jaws snapped. Lyra felt pain explode along her shoulder where Damien's teeth found purchase. Tasted blood, hers or his, she couldn't tell. They broke apart, circling, both bleeding. "You're strong," Damien said, his wolf's voice rumbling through the arena. "But strength isn't enough. You have no training, no instinct for the kill." He was right. Lyra had power, had size, but every move she made was reactive, defensive. She was fighting like a healer trying not to hurt someone, not like a predator trying to survive. Damien struck again. This time he went low, his jaws closing around her front leg. Bone cracked. Lyra screamed, the sound half human, half wolf. She slammed her other paw into his head, felt his skull give slightly, but he didn't let go. Pain shot through her, white hot, overwhelming. Her leg was useless now, and Damien knew it. He released her, backing away just far enough to let her feel the full extent of the damage. "Yield," he said. "I'll make it quick." Lyra's vision swam. The crowd was screaming, some for her, most for Damien, all baying for blood like this was entertainment instead of someone's life ending. She found Ronan in the chaos. He'd stood, his hands braced on the railing, his face a mask of carefully controlled rage. If she died, he'd kill Damien. She knew it with absolute certainty. He'd tear the other alpha apart regardless of law or tradition, and it would destroy his authority, maybe start a war between territories. She couldn't let that happen. Lyra forced herself upright on 3 legs, her broken one hanging useless. Every breath was agony. Her celestial power thrummed through her, vast and terrible. But she didn't know how to use it beyond basic transformation. It was like having a weapon you didn't know how to aim. Still fighting? Damien sounded almost impressed. Brave. Stupid, but brave. He charged. Lyra tried to dodge, but the injured leg betrayed her. Damien's weight slammed into her side, driving her down. His jaws closed around her throat, not killing, not yet, but the threat was clear. One wrong move and he'd rip her windpipe out. The crowd roared approval. Lyra could feel Damien's satisfaction radiating through his wolf, feel the moment drawing close when he'd end this. And something inside her snapped. Not broke, not gave up, but snapped like a chain that had been holding something back. The celestial power that had been singing in her veins suddenly roared. It wasn't just strength or speed. It was something older, something primal. The first wolves hadn't just been strong. They'd been connected to forces that most modern wolves had forgotten existed. Lyra stopped trying to fight like Damien expected. Stopped trying to be anything other than what she was. She let the power loose. Light exploded from her body, pure silver radiance that made the torches look like dying embers. Damien yelped and released her, stumbling back, his eyes watering from the brightness. The temperature in the arena plummeted. Frost didn't just spread from Lyra now. It erupted, coating the stone in inches of ice, climbing the walls, making wolves in the front rows scramble backward. What? Damien's voice held real fear now. That's not possible. Lyra rose. Her broken leg was still damaged, still screaming with pain, but the power flooding through her made it almost irrelevant. She could feel the arena around her, feel the stone and ice, and the very air responding to her will. This was what the celestial wolves had been, not just fighters. They'd been forces of nature given flesh. Yield, Lyra said, her wolf's voice echoing with something that sounded like thunder, like winter storms, like the end of the world. Before I forget, I'm supposed to be merciful. Damien's eyes widened. For the first time since the fight began, he looked uncertain. His wolf was powerful, yes, but this was beyond anything he'd trained for. This was myth made real. He attacked anyway, because alpha males were nothing if not stubborn. Lyra met him mid-leap. Her jaws didn't close on flesh. Instead, the air around Damien seemed to freeze solid. Ice crept up his legs, his chest, spreading faster than he could shake it off. He crashed to the ground, encased in crystalline prison that shouldn't be possible, that defied every law of how wolf abilities worked. The arena fell silent except for Damien's labored breathing. He struggled against the ice, his wolf's strength enormous, cracks spreading through the frozen shell. But Lyra could feel how easy it would be to make it thicker, colder, to keep layering it until he suffocated or his heart stopped from the cold. Yield, she said again. Damien's eyes met hers. She saw the calculation there, weighing his pride against his survival, trying to find an angle, a way to turn this around. But there wasn't one. The ice was already creeping toward his throat. I yield, he gasped. The horn blew, signaling the end of the challenge. Lyra released her hold on the ice, letting it crack and fall away. Damien collapsed, shaking, his wolf form bleeding from a dozen wounds where the ice had cut him. He transformed back to human, naked and shivering and alive. Lyra shifted back too. Her leg immediately buckled, the pain rushing back without the power to mute it. She went down hard, catching herself on her hands, trying not to scream. Ronan vaulted over the railing, landing in the arena and running to her. He caught her before she could collapse completely, his arms wrapping around her. You magnificent, terrifying, absolutely insane. He stopped, just held her, shaking. Don't ever do that again. Did I win? Lyra's voice came out weak. You won. Ronan's laugh sounded close to tears. You won, and nearly gave me a heart attack in the process. Around them, the arena erupted. Not in celebration, in chaos. Wolves were shouting, arguing, some praising Lyra's victory, while others screamed that it was impossible, that she'd cheated somehow. The noise was overwhelming. Vera appeared at Ronan's side, her face unreadable. We need to get her to the healers. That leg is badly broken. I know. Ronan lifted Lyra effortlessly. Clear a path. Marcus and a contingent of guards moved ahead, forcing the crowd to part. As they carried her from the arena, Lyra caught one more glimpse of Damien. He was being helped up by his supporters, his face twisted with humiliation and rage. Their eyes met across the chaos. This wasn't over. She could see it in his expression. She'd beaten him, yes, but she'd also made an enemy who would spend the rest of his life finding ways to destroy her. The healing chambers were quiet compared to the arena's madness. Ronan laid her on a table while healers swarmed, their hands glowing with working energy as they examined her leg. Clean break, one muttered. Could have been worse. Could have been dead, another said, shooting Lyra a look that might have been respect or horror. They worked in focused silence, setting the bone, weaving healing magic through the fracture. It hurt worse than the breaking had, and Lyra bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Ronan held her hand through it, his grip probably leaving bruises, but she didn't care. When they finally finished, one of the healers, an older woman with silver streaking her dark hair, lingered. That power you used, she said quietly. The ice. That's not standard celestial ability. What do you mean? Lyra's voice was hoarse. Celestial wolves were known for their strength, their size, their resilience, but elemental manipulation? The healer shook her head. That's something else entirely. Something older than the celestial line itself. How much older? Ronan asked. Old enough that most wolves think it's just legend. The healer met Lyra's eyes. There were wolves before the first mothers, before territories or packs or civilization. They called them the primal bloodlines, connected directly to elemental forces, earth, fire, water, ice. No one's seen one in over 1,000 years. Are you saying Lyra's not celestial? Ronan's hand tightened on hers. I'm saying she's both. Or she's something we don't have words for anymore. The healer stepped back. Either way, you need to be careful. There are wolves in this compound old enough to remember the stories about primals. And those stories don't end well. After she left, silence filled the chamber. Lyra stared at the ceiling, trying to process this new information. She'd gone from being nothing to being celestial to being something even rarer in the span of 3 days. It felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke. Lyra, Ronan said softly, I don't want to talk about it. We have to. No, we don't. She sat up, ignoring the protest from her healing leg. I just fought a death match in front of hundreds of wolves. I'm tired, I'm in pain, and I really don't want to discuss how I'm apparently some kind of mythological impossibility right now. Ronan studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but soon. A commotion outside the healing chambers interrupted them. Voices raised in argument, then Marcus shouting, You can't go in there! The door slammed open. Kyle stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his eyes wild. 2 guards had him by the arms, but he'd clearly fought his way this far. Lyra, he gasped, please, I need to talk to you. Get him out, Ronan said, his voice dropping to something deadly. No. Lyra surprised herself. Let him speak. Lyra. 1 minute. She met Ronan's eyes. He gets 1 minute, then he leaves, forever. Ronan's jaw clenched, but he nodded to the guards. They released Kyle but remained close, ready to grab him again if needed. Kale stumbled forward, stopping a few feet from the table. Up close, he looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his face drawn, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, he said. I know that's not enough, that it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. For what, exactly? Lyra kept her voice level. For lying to me? For using me? For humiliating me in front of my entire pack? All of it. Kael ran a hand through his hair. I was a coward. My father pressured me to bond with Sarah, said it was my duty to the pack, and I couldn't stand up to him. So I took the easy way out and hurt you instead. You destroyed me, Lyra said quietly. I know. Kael's voice broke. And then I watched you rise from that destruction and become something I could never hope to touch. You're a queen, Lyra. You were always meant for more than a frontier pack and a weak alpha who couldn't see your worth. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, Kyle shook his head. I just, when I heard about the challenge, I had to come. Had to see for myself that you were okay. And watching you fight Damien, seeing that power, he stopped. You're magnificent, and I'm the fool who let you go. Silence fell. Lyra looked at the man who'd once been her whole world, who'd promised her everything and delivered nothing but pain. And she felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Your minute's up, she said. Kale flinched like she'd struck him. Lyra, go back to your pack, Kale. Back to Sarah and your father and the life you chose. I hope it makes you happy. She turned away, dismissing him. We're done. Please. She said you're done. Ronan's voice cut like steel. Guards, escort this wolf from the compound. If he's still inside the walls in 10 minutes, throw him off the mountain. The guards grabbed Kyle again, dragging him toward the door. He fought them, calling Lyra's name, begging for another chance. But she didn't look back, didn't give him even a moment more of her attention. When the door closed and his voice finally faded, Ronan moved to sit beside her. How do you feel? He asked. Tired, Lyra admitted, and weirdly empty. I thought confronting him would feel bigger, more important. He doesn't deserve importance. Ronan took her hand. He's part of your past. Focus on your future. Lyra leaned against him, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow we deal with the fallout from tonight's chaos. Ronan pressed a kiss to her temple. But tonight, you've earned peace. Peace lasted approximately 3 hours. Lyra woke to alarms screaming through the compound. Ronan was already moving, pulling on clothes, barking orders to guards who burst through the door. What's happening? Lyra struggled upright, her healing leg protesting. Fire, Marcus said, appearing in the doorway. The west wing is burning. Someone said it deliberately. Damien, Ronan growled. Maybe. Or someone taking advantage of the chaos. Marcus looked at Lyra. They're targeting the Queen's wing. Your chambers are in the west tower. Ice flooded Lyra's veins. My chambers? We're evacuating everyone. Marcus's expression was grim. But it's bad. Whoever set this knew what they were doing. The fire's spreading faster than it should. Ronan turned to Lyra. You stay here. It's safe. Like hell! Lyra slid off the table, testing her weight on the injured leg. It held, barely. Those are my people. I'm going. Lyra, I'm a healer, Ronan. Fire means burn, smoke inhalation, injuries. They need me. For a second, she thought he'd argue. Then his expression shifted to something between pride and resignation. Fine. But you don't leave my sight. They ran through corridors filling with smoke, passing wolves fleeing in the opposite direction. The fire had indeed spread impossibly fast, consuming the west wing with a hunger that felt almost alive. As they rounded a corner, Lyra saw flames licking up the walls, eating through ancient tapestries, turning the beautiful compound into an inferno. The staff quarters, someone screamed. They're trapped! Ronan and Marcus immediately changed direction, heading for the servants' wing. Lyra followed, her healer's instincts overriding her fear. They burst through a door to find a hallway completely engulfed. At the far end, through the flames, Lyra could see faces pressed against windows. A dozen staff members, including Mira, trapped with no way out. We can't reach them, Marcus said, coughing through the smoke. The fire's too hot. Even our wolves would burn. But mine won't, Lyra said. She transformed before Ronan could stop her. The silver wolf emerged, larger than life, and the ice that was apparently part of her primal heritage exploded outward. The flames recoiled from the cold, creating a tunnel through the inferno. Go! Lyra's wolf voice echoed. I'll hold it. Ronan and Marcus didn't hesitate. They ran through the ice tunnel, reaching the trapped staff and ushering them back through. Lyra held the cold, pushing back against the fire's rage, feeling her power drain with every second. The heat was immense even through the ice. She could feel her strength failing, the flames starting to push back. Everyone's out, Ronan shouted. Lyra, let it go. She released the ice and ran. The flames crashed back together behind her like a closing fist. They burst into the main corridor, coughing and burned, but alive. All the staff members had made it. Mira was crying, clutching at Lyra's wolf form with desperate gratitude. But the victory was short-lived. The fire continued spreading, consuming room after room with terrifying efficiency. And then Vera appeared, her face ash-stained, her usual composure shattered. "The archives," she gasped. "The treaty room. It's going to reach the original territorial agreements. If those burn, the legal foundation of the 5 territories collapses." "What?" Ronan looked stricken. "The original treaties are on ancient parchment stored in the vault beneath the West Wing. If the fire reaches them before we can evacuate the documents..." Vera didn't finish. She didn't have to. "Where's the vault?" Lyra demanded. "You can't," Ronan said immediately. "That section is completely engulfed. It's suicide. Then we lose everything holding the territories together and probably start a war." Lyra met his eyes. "I can do this. My ice is strong enough." "It almost wasn't strong enough to save the staff." "Then it's good I'm getting practice." Lyra ran before anyone could stop her, her wolf form carrying her back into the inferno. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking, but she pushed forward, following Vera's shouted directions. Down stairs that were already burning, through hallways where the ceiling was collapsing, into the vault chamber where flames were just beginning to consume the walls. The original treaties sat on a stone pedestal, ancient documents protected by glass cases that were already starting to crack from the heat. Lyra transformed back to human long enough to grab the cases, then shifted again, creating an ice shield around them and herself. The way back was worse than the way down. The stairs had collapsed. The ceiling was falling. Lyra had to blast through walls with concentrated cold, creating new paths, her power draining with every obstacle. She could feel herself weakening, could feel the ice shield flickering. She emerged into the main corridor to find Ronan waiting, his face gray with fear. The moment he saw her, relief crashed across his features. He helped her shift back, taking the treaty cases from her trembling hands. "You're insane," he said. "You've mentioned that." Lyra's legs gave out. Ronan caught her before she hit the ground. The fire burned through the night. By dawn, the West Wing was completely destroyed, reduced to smoking rubble and broken stone. The death toll was 0, a miracle no one could quite believe. The injured numbered in the dozens, and Lyra spent the morning working alongside the healing staff, tending burns and smoke damage despite her own exhaustion. When the sun finally climbed high enough to see by, Ronan called an emergency gathering in the main hall, one of the few chambers undamaged by the fire. The fire was deliberately set, he announced to the assembled alphas and court members, using accelerants placed at strategic points. This was attempted murder and attempted treason. When I find who's responsible, they will wish they'd died in the flames. His eyes cut to Damien, who stood in the crowd looking appropriately horrified. But Lyra noticed something. Damien's reaction seemed genuine. He looked shocked, confused, not the expression of someone whose plan had failed. And if it wasn't Damien, then who? The answer came 3 hours later, delivered by guards who'd been investigating the fire's origin. They found Vera in her chambers, methodically burning papers, and when they tried to arrest her, she transformed and tried to fight her way out. It took 6 guards to bring her down. Lyra stared at the older woman through the bars of the holding cell, trying to reconcile this with the advisor who'd spent 3 days preparing her for court. "Why?" she asked simply. Vera looked up, her silver hair disheveled, her formal robes torn and stained. "Because you're dangerous," she said calmly. "Not to Ronan, to all of us. A primal bloodline bonded to the king? That kind of power hasn't existed in over a millennium. It could reshape everything. So you tried to kill me? I tried to make it look like an accident, a tragic fire during a night of celebration." Vera's smile was cold. "But you had to play hero, had to save everyone, had to prove you're exactly the kind of queen who'll inspire loyalty and make removing you impossible." "You're insane," Lyra breathed. "I'm practical." Vera stood, moving to the bars. "You think the court will accept this? A frontier girl with no training, no political experience, just raw power and good intentions? They'll use you, Lyra, turn you into a weapon, and when you're no longer useful, they'll find a way to dispose of you just like I tried to. Except I won't let them." "No," Vera agreed. "You'll fight, and that's when the real danger begins. Because a primal who fights back doesn't just destroy her enemies, she destroys everything around her." Guards dragged Vera away, still talking, still warning, still convinced she'd been right to try murder disguised as tragedy. Lyra walked out of the cells to find Ronan waiting. He pulled her close without a word and she let him, too tired to hold herself upright anymore. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. But Lyra knew better. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because Vera had been right about one thing. The court would see her power and either try to control it or destroy it. And Lyra was done being controlled, done being dismissed, done being anything but exactly what she was, even if it meant burning the whole system down. The reconstruction of the West Wing began the next morning, but the real rebuilding happened in the council chamber 3 days later. Every alpha from the 5 territories sat around the massive stone table, their faces ranging from hostile to curious to openly antagonistic. Lyra stood at Ronan's side, her injured legs still tender but functional, watching them watch her. "We're here to discuss the succession protocols," an older alpha said, his gray beard bristling. "Given recent events." "Recent events being my bonding," Lyra said flatly. The alpha, Gareth from the Southern Ridge, had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Among other things, the fire, Vera's arrest, the revelation of your bloodline. These are significant disruptions to established order." "Established order tried to murder me," Lyra pointed out. "And we've condemned that action," another alpha interjected smoothly. This one was younger, sharp-eyed, dangerous in the way politicians were dangerous. But Vera's concerns weren't entirely unfounded. A primal bloodline is unprecedented in modern times. We need protocols for managing such power. "Managing," Ronan repeated, his voice deadly soft. "Interesting word choice, Matthias." Matthias spread his hands. "I mean no disrespect to your queen, my king, but surely you understand our position. The last known primal wolves caused catastrophic damage before they were contained. Cities destroyed. Entire bloodlines wiped out. We can't simply ignore that history." "You want to contain me," Lyra said. "We want assurances." Gareth leaned forward. "That your power won't be turned against the territories. That you understand the responsibility that comes with such gifts." Lyra felt Ronan tense beside her, felt the bond between them crackle with barely restrained violence. He was 3 seconds from tearing these alphas apart for even suggesting she needed to be controlled. She put a hand on his arm, stepped forward. "You want assurances?" she said. "Fine. Let me tell you what I learned in the past week. I learned that court politics is just pack dynamics with better clothing. I learned that every single one of you has spent years playing games with each other's lives, treating wolves like chess pieces. I learned that the system you're so desperate to protect is rotten from the inside out." The chamber went deadly quiet. "I also learned," Lyra continued, her voice carrying to every corner, "that most of you would rather see me dead than deal with something you can't predict, something you can't manipulate or bribe or threaten into submission. And honestly, I don't blame you. I'm terrifying. I terrify myself sometimes." "Then you admit the danger," Matthias started. "I admit I have power. What I won't admit is that power automatically equals danger." Lyra met each alpha's eyes in turn. "You know what else has power? Ronan. Every alpha in this room, the guards outside. The difference is you've all been trained from birth to wield your wolves like weapons. I haven't. So yes, I'm dangerous, but not because I'm primal, because I don't play by your rules." "That's precisely what concerns us," Gareth said. "Good." Lyra smiled without humor. "Stay concerned, stay alert, because I'm going to change things around here, and you can either adapt or get out of the way." An older female alpha, Isadora from the Eastern Plains, laughed suddenly, sharp and genuine. "I like her. She's got more spine than the last 3 queens combined." "The last 3 queens were selected for their political connections, not their personalities," another alpha muttered. "Exactly my point." Isadora stood, moving around the table to get a better look at Lyra. "We've spent centuries breeding the fire out of our queens, making them decorative and docile and utterly useless except for producing heirs. Then we wonder why our court is stagnant." She turned to address the room. "Maybe a primal is exactly what we need. Someone who can't be bullied or bought. Someone who could destroy us all on a whim," Matthias shot back. "Could," Lyra agreed. "Won't. Because unlike most of you, I actually care what happens to the wolves under my authority." She paused. "Speaking of which, I want to establish healing centers in each territory. Free access for any wolf, regardless of pack standing. The alphas stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. You want to do what? Gareth finally managed. Healing centers, staffed by trained healers, open to everyone. Lyra had been thinking about this since the fire, since watching pack members suffer because they couldn't afford proper medical care. I've seen too many wolves die from treatable injuries because they were considered too low-ranking to waste resources on. It's barbaric and it's going to change. The cost would be astronomical, Matthias protested. Then we'll find the money, cut it from ceremonial budgets, reduce the court's wine expenditures. I don't care how, but it's happening. You can't just decree— Actually, she can, Ronan said, speaking for the first time since Lyra had started. Queens have autonomous authority over domestic policy. It's in the original treaties I risked my life to save from the fire. Matthias's jaw clenched. This is exactly what we feared. Unchecked power making sweeping changes without consultation. I'm consulting now, Lyra interrupted. I'm telling you what I plan to do. You can offer input on implementation, but the decision is made. Healing centers in all 5 territories within 6 months. The room erupted, alphas shouting over each other, some supporting the idea, most protesting the audacity of a week-old queen making such massive policy shifts. Lyra stood in the center of the chaos, her head high, refusing to back down. Finally, Isadora slammed her hand on the table, the crack of impact silencing everyone. Enough, she said. The girl's right. We've let our lower-ranked wolves suffer for too long. If establishing healing centers is the price of having a queen with actual convictions, I'll pay it gladly. She looked at Lyra. Eastern Plains will host the first center. Send me your healers. One by one, the other alphas reluctantly agreed. Not because they wanted to, Lyra could see the resentment in their eyes, but because refusing would make them look weak, uncaring. She'd boxed them into a corner using their own pride against them. After the council dispersed, Ronan pulled her aside. That was brilliant, he said, and incredibly risky. They were going to hate me anyway. Lyra leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting her in waves. At least this way, I'm doing something useful with their hostility. Isadora's right, though. You do have more spine than my last 3 queens combined. Ronan's smile was fierce. My father chose political allies. My grandfather chose bloodline connections. I chose a partner, and watching you terrify the council might be my new favorite entertainment. Glad I could amuse you. You did more than amuse me. He pulled her close, his voice dropping. You showed them that being queen isn't about looking pretty and producing heirs. It's about having the courage to change a broken system. They're going to fight you every step of the way. Let them. Lyra met his eyes. I didn't survive being nothing just to become a decorative figurehead. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. The Healing Center initiative moved forward with surprising speed, partly because Lyra refused to let anyone slow it down. She spent the next 3 weeks traveling to each territory, meeting with local healers, assessing needs, dealing with alpha resistance with a combination of charm and barely veiled threats. The Southern Ridge was the worst. Gareth met her at the border with a contingent of warriors and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Queen Lyra, he said, welcome to our territory. Though I must say, your visit is somewhat unexpected. I told the council I'd be visiting each territory personally. Lyra dismounted from her horse, Marcus and a small guard detail flanking her. Ronan had wanted to come, but she'd insisted on doing this alone. The territories needed to see her as independent, not just an extension of the king. Yes, but we assumed you'd send delegates. Gareth's tone held faint disapproval. A queen traveling without her king is unusual. I'm an unusual queen. The tour of Southern Ridge's existing medical facilities was deliberately designed to discourage her. Gareth showed her the worst locations, cramped, understaffed, poorly supplied. He paraded injured wolves in front of her, their conditions deteriorating from lack of care, clearly hoping to overwhelm her with the scope of the problem. Instead, Lyra rolled up her sleeves and started working. She spent 3 days in Southern Ridge, treating patients personally, teaching local healers techniques they'd never seen, using her celestial energy to accelerate healing in cases that would have taken weeks otherwise. Word spread. By the second day, wolves were lining up outside the temporary clinic she'd established, hoping for a chance to be treated by the primal queen. On the third night, Gareth found her still working by lamplight, stitching a young wolf's shoulder where a hunting accident had torn muscle. "You're supposed to be supervising," he said, "not doing the actual healing." "Why?" Lyra didn't look up from her work. "I'm good at this. Better than most of your healers. No offense to them. Queens don't work with their hands, I know. You've mentioned it multiple times." Lyra finished the stitching, applied a healing salve, and finally looked at Gareth. "Here's the thing. I don't care what queens usually do. I care about these wolves getting the treatment they deserve." Gareth watched her in silence for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. "Isadora was right about you," he said. "You're going to turn this entire court on its head. Is that approval I'm hearing?" "It's acknowledgement." He pulled up a chair, sitting across from her. "I fought against this initiative because I didn't want a frontier healer telling me how to run my territory. But watching you work these past few days," he paused, "you actually care. It's not political maneuvering or power play. You genuinely want to help." "Shocking, I know." "It is, actually." Gareth's expression turned serious. "Most of us stopped caring about individual wolves a long time ago. We think in terms of pack strength, political advantage, territorial control. The individual gets lost in the bigger picture. That's exactly what I'm trying to change." "I know." He stood, moving toward the door. "You'll have Southern Ridge's full support for the healing centers. And Lyra, for what it's worth, you're going to make a hell of a queen." After he left, Lyra sat in the quiet clinic, letting the weight of his words settle over her. It wasn't much. One alpha's approval out of dozens who still resented her existence. But it was a start. The Eastern Plains was easier. Isadora welcomed her with open arms and genuine enthusiasm, already having prepared a location for the new healing center. They spent a week working together, Isadora introducing Lyra to every pack in her territory, making it clear that anyone who disrespected the queen would answer to her personally. "You've made an ally for life," Isadora said one evening over dinner. "Most queens are too afraid of their own shadows to actually do anything. You're different." "I had good motivation," Lyra said. "Spent most of my life being told I was worthless. Kind of makes you want to prove everyone wrong." "And you have." Isadora raised her glass. "To proving people wrong." They drank to that. The Western Reaches and Northern Ridge fell into line after seeing Southern Ridges and Eastern Plains acceptance. Only the Central Territories, Ronan's direct holdings, remained, and those were already being organized by Marcus, who'd thrown himself into the project with unexpected passion. "Turns out, I like having a purpose beyond looking decorative at court functions," he told Lyra when she returned to Shadow Peak after 6 weeks on the road. "Who knew?" The night of her return, Ronan held a formal dinner to celebrate the healing initiative's progress. Every major alpha attended, along with court officials and visiting dignitaries. Lyra wore a gown that cost more than most wolves earned in a year, deep silver, matching her wolf, with the bonding mark visible at her throat. She looked like a queen. She felt like an imposter. "Stop fidgeting," Ronan murmured as they entered the dining hall. "You've earned this." "Have I? 6 weeks ago I was a healer being mocked by my own pack. Now I'm supposed to lead a toast in front of 200 influential wolves?" "Yes." He squeezed her hand. "Because you're not that healer anymore. You're the woman who faced down the council, traveled to hostile territories alone, and changed a system that's been broken for centuries. Own it." The dinner was excruciating. Hours of formal toasts, political maneuvering disguised as polite conversation, alphas jockeying for position and favor. Lyra smiled until her face hurt, made small talk until her voice went hoarse, and tried very hard not to transform into her wolf and flee into the mountains. Then Damien stood. The hall fell silent. He'd been notably absent from court since his defeat in the arena, recovering from his injuries and his family's estates. His presence tonight was the first time Lyra had seen him since the fight. "I propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden quiet. "To Queen Lyra." Every eye turned to him. Lyra's hand tightened on her wine glass, waiting for the verbal knife she knew was coming. "When I challenged our queen in the arena," Damien continued, "I believed her to be a fraud. A convenient bloodline leveraged for political gain. I was wrong." He met Lyra's eyes across the room. I was beaten fairly by a superior opponent, but more than that, I've watched over the past weeks as she's worked tirelessly to establish healing centers, traveling to each territory personally, treating wolves who'd been ignored by the system. She's shown more dedication to the welfare of our people in 6 weeks than I've seen from any queen in my lifetime. He raised his glass higher. I misjudged you, Your Majesty, and I formally apologize. You're not just powerful, you're worthy, and that combination is going to change everything. He paused. To Queen Lyra, may she continue proving us all wrong. To Queen Lyra, the hall echoed, hundreds of voices joining in the toast. Lyra stood, her legs shaking, her throat tight. This was it. The moment she'd been fighting toward without realizing it, acceptance. Not from everyone, not even from most, but from enough that it mattered. Thank you, she said, her voice carrying despite her nerves. I won't pretend the past weeks have been easy. I've been questioned, resisted, and openly doubted at every turn. But I understand why. Power without proof is just potential. And potential doesn't build healing centers or treat injured wolves or change broken systems. She looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. I didn't choose to be primal. I didn't ask for celestial blood or this position. But I'm here now, and I refuse to waste it. Every wolf in the 5 territories deserves access to healing, regardless of rank or pack standing. That's not radical, that's basic decency. And if fighting for basic decency makes me a disruptive force, then I'll disrupt gladly. The hall erupted in applause. Not universal, Lyra could see pockets of wolves who remained stone-faced, unconvinced. But enough. Enough that the tide was turning. Ronan stood beside her, his pride radiating through their bond so strongly it made her chest ache. After the dinner, they escaped to the royal chambers, both exhausted from the performance of court life. Lyra kicked off her formal shoes the moment the door closed, groaning with relief. I hate those things, she muttered. You wore them beautifully. Ronan poured them both wine, handing her a glass. Damien's toast surprised me. Me too. I was waiting for the insult. There wasn't one. He meant every word. Ronan sat beside her on the sofa. You've done something I didn't think possible. You've earned the respect of wolves who were determined to hate you. Not all of them. No, but enough. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You're changing the court, Lyra, making it into something better than it was. My father would have loved you. Would he? Lyra leaned against him. From what Marcus says, he was pretty traditional. He was, but he also believed that true strength came from protecting those weaker than yourself. You embody that belief. Ronan's voice softened. I wish he could have met you. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the evening slowly lifting. Through the windows, Lyra could see shadow peaks spread below them, lights twinkling in the darkness, wolves moving through courtyards and corridors, living their lives under the protection of a king and queen who were slowly learning how to actually lead. Ronan, Lyra said quietly, thank you. For what? For seeing me when I was nothing, for bonding me when you could have chosen someone easier, safer, more appropriate. She turned to face him. You changed my life. You changed mine. He cupped her face in his hands. I was so tired of being alone in this position, surrounded by hundreds of wolves but never truly connected to any of them. Then you appeared, this fierce, broken healer who refused to stay broken, and everything shifted. He kissed her, slow and deep, and Lyra felt the bond between them flare bright and warm. This was real. Not political maneuvering or strategic alliance, but actual partnership forged in fire and tested through chaos. When they finally pulled apart, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. We're going to face more challenges, he said. The court won't give up trying to control or undermine you. There will be wolves who resent your changes, who want the old ways back. I know. Can you handle it? Lyra thought about the girl she'd been 2 months ago, scared, powerless, convinced she was broken. Then she thought about who she'd become. Queen, primal, healer, fighter. Someone who'd stared down an entire council and won. Someone who'd traveled hostile territories and earned grudging respect. Someone who'd survived assassination attempts and arena challenges and still kept pushing forward. Yeah, she said. I can handle it. What? The next morning brought news that made even that confidence waver. Marcus burst into their chambers before dawn, his face pale. We have a problem, he said. A big one. What now? Ronan was already pulling on clothes. Iron Pelt territory. There's been an outbreak, some kind of infection spreading through the packs. Their healers don't know what it is, and it's killing wolves within days of symptoms appearing. Marcus looked at Lyra. They're asking for help. Specifically, they're asking for you. Lyra's blood went cold. Iron Pelt. The pack that had rejected her, mocked her, treated her like nothing for her entire life. Now they needed her. How bad is it? She asked. Bad, 15 dead already, more than 50 infected. If it's not contained, it could spread to neighboring territories. Marcus hesitated. Alpha Garrick sent the request personally, said you're the only healer skilled enough to handle something this serious. Alpha Garrick. Lyra's voice came out flat. Kale's father, the man who'd pressured his son into rejecting her, who'd looked the other way while his pack tormented her for years. You don't have to go, Ronan said immediately. We can send other healers. No. Lyra stood, already moving toward her wardrobe. If this spreads beyond Iron Pelt, it could devastate the frontier territories. And despite everything, those are still my people. They're still wolves who deserve help. Lyra, I'm going. She turned to face him. But I'm going as queen, not as the broken girl they discarded. They want my help? They're going to show proper respect for it. Ronan studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we go together, and they'll show you the respect you deserve, or I'll burn that territory to the ground myself. They departed within the hour, taking Marcus, a medical team, and enough guards to make a statement. The journey to Iron Pelt took 2 days of hard riding. With every mile closer, Lyra felt her resolve strengthening and her old wounds aching in equal measure. This was the place that had shaped her, broken her, taught her she was worthless. Now she was returning as the most powerful queen in 5 territories. The irony was almost beautiful. They crossed into Iron Pelt territory at sunset on the second day. The border guards took one look at the royal contingent and immediately sent runners ahead to announce their arrival. By the time they reached the main settlement, half the pack had gathered to watch. Lyra kept her head high as they rode through familiar streets. She saw faces she recognized, wolves who'd laughed at her, who'd pushed her around, who'd treated her healing skills as the only valuable thing about her existence. Now they watched in stunned silence as she passed, flanked by guards, wearing royal colors, every inch a queen. Alpha Garrick waited in the central square, looking older than Lyra remembered. Kale stood beside him, his face carefully blank. Sarah was conspicuously absent. Garrick stepped forward as Lyra dismounted. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then slowly, the Alpha knelt. Your Majesty, he said, his voice rough. Thank you for coming. The entire pack dropped to their knees behind him, hundreds of wolves bowing to the girl they'd once called nothing. Lyra felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could be petty now, could make them grovel, could turn this into revenge for every slight, every insult, every moment they'd made her feel less than. Instead, she said, Get up, all of you. I'm not here for ceremony. I'm here to stop people from dying. She walked past Garrick without another word, heading toward the healing den. Her healing den, the one she'd organized and maintained for years. It felt strange returning here, seeing the supplies she'd carefully cataloged still in their places, the notes she'd written about pack members' medical histories still tacked to the walls. The infected are in isolation, Garrick said, following her. We've quarantined them to prevent spread, but we don't know what else to do. Show me. The isolation area was makeshift, a series of small cabins on the settlement's edge. The moment Lyra entered the first cabin, she knew this was serious. The wolf inside was barely conscious, fever-bright and shaking, his skin covered in dark veins that spread from a wound on his shoulder. When did symptoms start? She asked. 3 days ago. Started with the wound? Hunting accident. Then the fever hit, and the veins. Garrick gestured helplessly. We've never seen anything like it. Lyra examined the wound carefully, her healer's training kicking in automatically. The injury itself was minor, a shallow gash that should have healed easily. But something else was in the tissue, something dark and wrong, that her celestial senses could feel like poison. "This isn't natural," she said. "Someone poisoned this wound, deliberately." "What?" Garrick's face went white. "Who would—" "I don't know, but this isn't an accident or natural outbreak." Lyra stood, her mind racing. "Get me samples from every infected wolf. I need to see if the poison's the same in all cases." She worked through the night, examining patients, collecting samples, using her primal abilities to slow the poison's spread in the worst cases. Ronan and Marcus helped coordinate the medical team, setting up proper quarantine procedures, tracking the infection's origin. By dawn, Lyra had confirmed her suspicion. Every infected wolf had been injured in what seemed like accidents over the past week. Hunting mishaps, training injuries, random cuts. But the common thread was clear. Someone had deliberately infected each wound with the same poison. "Who?" Kale asked. He'd been hovering in the background all night, trying to help, but mostly staying out of Lyra's way. "Who would do this to us?" "Someone who wants to destabilize the frontier territories," Lyra said. "Or someone who wants to make me look incompetent by calling me here to handle an unsolvable crisis." "Can you solve it?" Garrick's voice held desperate hope. Lyra looked at the samples spread before her, at the complex poison working its way through wolves' systems. It was sophisticated, designed by someone with extensive healing knowledge, someone who understood exactly how to weaponize medicine. "Maybe," she said, "but I need access to my full supplies, and I need time." "Whatever you need," Garrick said immediately. What Lyra needed was 3 straight days of intense work. She barely slept, barely ate, pushing herself and her primal healing abilities to their limits. She synthesized counteragents, tested them on the infected, adjusted formulas when they didn't work. The medical team from Shadow Peak worked alongside her, following her instructions with military precision. On the 3rd day, one of the infected wolves stabilized. On the 4th day, another recovered completely. By the end of the week, every infected wolf was on the path to full recovery. The pack erupted in celebration. They'd been facing potential devastation, and Lyra had stopped it, saved lives that would have been lost. Proven that her healing skills weren't just competent, they were exceptional. Alpha Garrick called a formal gathering the night after the last patient was declared stable. The entire pack assembled, and for the 2nd time, Lyra stood before them. But this time was different. "You saved us," Garrick said simply. "Despite how we treated you, despite every reason you had to let us suffer for our cruelty. You came when we called and saved our people." "I'm a healer," Lyra said. "It's what I do." "You're more than that," Garrick's voice carried across the silent crowd. "You're the queen we never deserved. And on behalf of Iron Pelt, I formally apologize for every moment of disrespect, every insult, every time we failed to see your worth." He knelt again. This time the gesture held genuine remorse. "Rise, Alpha Garrick," Lyra said quietly. "I didn't come here for apologies. I came because wolves needed help. But I appreciate the acknowledgement." She turned to address the assembled pack. "Some of you think this changes things between us. It doesn't. I'm not your pack member anymore. I'm your queen, and my loyalty belongs to all the territories equally, not just the one I came from." She paused. "But I won't forget where I started. And I won't forget that sometimes the most broken places produce the strongest survivors." Kale stepped forward from the crowd. "Lyra, don't." She held up a hand. "You made your choice. Live with it." His face crumpled, but she'd already turned away, moved past him toward where Ronan waited at the edge of the gathering, his expression proud and fierce. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "More than ready." They left Iron Pelt the next morning. As their convoy departed, Lyra looked back one last time at the settlement that had shaped her entire life. She felt no anger now, no bitterness, just a quiet satisfaction that she'd returned on her own terms and left them better than she'd found them. "You're smiling," Ronan observed. "I earned this," Lyra said. "Not just the title or the power. I earned the right to hold my head high, to be proud of who I've become." "You did more than earn it." Ronan reached over, taking her hand. "You've become exactly what a queen should be, strong, compassionate, and absolutely terrifying when necessary." Lyra laughed, the sound carrying across the morning air. For the first time since her transformation, she felt like she'd finally found her footing, like the chaos of the past months had settled into something she could actually build from. The girl they'd called nothing had become someone they couldn't ignore, and she was just getting started. The poison investigation took another 2 weeks to trace back to its source. Lyra worked alongside Ronan's intelligence network, following the trail of corrupted medical supplies through black market dealers and compromised healers. Every lead brought them closer to a truth that made Lyra's stomach turn. The mastermind wasn't some external enemy trying to destabilize the territories. It was someone inside Shadow Peak itself. Matthias, Ronan said flatly, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. That bastard tried to kill an entire pack just to undermine you. Not just undermine me, destroy my credibility. Lyra traced the supply chain diagram with one finger. If I'd failed to cure the outbreak, the court would have said I was incompetent, that my healing skills were exaggerated, that I had no business being queen. And if you succeeded? Marcus asked from his position by the window. Then he'd activate whatever backup plan he had waiting. Lyra looked up at Ronan. This isn't over. Matthias wouldn't put all his resources into one attempt. She was right. 3 days later, delegations from all 5 territories arrived at Shadow Peak for the formal Winter Council, the annual gathering where territorial disputes were resolved and policies ratified. Matthias came with the northern delegation, his face a mask of political neutrality, giving no indication he'd recently attempted mass murder. We can't prove it was him, Ronan growled during their private war council the night before the proceedings. Not definitively enough to bring charges. The evidence is strong, but circumstantial. Then we catch him in the act, Lyra said. He's going to try something during the council. I can feel it. What makes you so certain? Marcus asked. Because that's what I would do if I were him. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. Whatever he's planning, it'll be public and devastating. The Winter Council opened with traditional ceremony, alphas presenting their territory's achievements, grievances aired, trade agreements negotiated. Lyra sat beside Ronan on the raised platform, watching Matthias work the room with practiced ease. He was good, she had to admit. Charming, intelligent, presenting himself as the voice of reasonable tradition against her radical changes. The healing centers have been a success, he acknowledged during the policy review session. Though the costs have strained several territories' budgets significantly, perhaps we should consider scaling back the initiative until we can ensure financial sustainability. The Eastern Plains has absorbed the costs without issue, Isadora countered immediately. Maybe Northern Ridge just needs better financial management. Polite laughter rippled through the chamber. Matthias's smile never wavered, but Lyra caught the flash of anger in his eyes. I'm merely suggesting prudence, he said smoothly. Queen Lyra's passion for helping the less fortunate is admirable, but passion must be balanced with practicality. We can't bankrupt our territories chasing idealistic reforms. The only thing bankrupting territories is corruption, Lyra said, her voice cutting through the chamber. Inflated ceremonial budgets, bribes disguised as gifts, resources diverted to private coffers. Maybe if we address the actual financial drains, we'd have plenty of money for healing centers. The room went silent. Several alphas shifted uncomfortably. Matthias's expression remained pleasant, but his fingers tightened on the armrest of his chair. That's quite an accusation, Your Majesty, he said. Do you have evidence of this alleged corruption? I have 6 weeks of traveling through territories and seeing exactly where resources are going. I have conversations with wolves who've watched their leaders live in luxury while pack members starve. Lyra stood, addressing the assembled council directly. Every territory has corruption, some worse than others, and until we address it honestly, we have no right to complain about the cost of actually helping our people. Passionate words, Matthias said, but passion isn't policy. Where's your proof? Your documentation? This was the trap. He wanted her to make accusations she couldn't substantiate, to look like an idealistic fool throwing around conspiracy theories. But Lyra had spent 2 months learning how the court worked, how to anticipate attacks, how to turn weaknesses into weapons. Marcus, she said, would you distribute the reports? Marcus moved through the chamber, handing thick folders to each alpha. Inside were detailed financial analyses of every territory, and income, expenditures, discrepancies, and very specific questions about where certain large sums had disappeared to. My team has been auditing territorial finances for the past month, Lyra said calmly, with King Ronan's authorization. What we found was illuminating. Most territories have minor inefficiencies, but Northern Ridge. She looked directly at Matthias. Northern Ridge has been systematically embezzling resources for years. Money meant for infrastructure, defense, and social programs has been diverted to private accounts. Accounts controlled by Alpha Matthias and his inner circle. The chamber erupted. Matthias shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking. This is slander! A political attack disguised as, it's documented fact, Ronan said, his voice cutting through the noise like steel. Every transaction traced, every account verified. You've been stealing from your own territory, Matthias. And when my queen threatened your operation by establishing oversight through the healing centers, you tried to destroy her credibility by poisoning Ironpelt's population. You can't prove that. Actually, we can. Lyra pulled out a second folder. The poison used in Ironpelt was sophisticated, required specific knowledge and resources to create. We traced the components back to a healer in Northern Ridge, your personal physician, Matthias. He's currently in custody and has given a full confession in exchange for leniency. The color drained from Matthias's face. Around the chamber, wolves who'd been supporting him suddenly found other places to look. Political allies disappeared like smoke. You tried to kill innocent wolves to protect your corruption, Lyra continued. You sabotaged healing efforts, endangered an entire territory, and attempted to undermine the crown. That's treason. Multiple counts. I was protecting tradition, Matthias's voice rose to a shout. Protecting the old ways from a frontier nobody who thinks 6 weeks as queen makes her qualified to tear down everything we've built. The old ways that let you steal and murder without consequence? Ronan stood, his power filling the chamber, forcing lesser wolves to their knees. Those traditions end today. You can't do this. The council will vote, Isadora interrupted, standing as well. All in favor of stripping Matthias of his alpha status and bringing him to trial for treason and attempted mass murder? Every hand went up. Even the wolves from Northern Ridge, their faces twisted with shame and anger at their leader's betrayal. Matthias transformed, his wolf erupting in a last desperate attempt at escape. But Ronan was faster. He shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf slamming into Matthias and driving him to the stone floor. The fight was over in seconds. Ronan's jaws at Matthias's throat, the defeated alpha forced into submission. Guards moved in, silver chains specifically designed to suppress wolf transformations. Matthias was dragged from the chamber still screaming about tradition and conspiracy, but his voice faded to nothing as the doors slammed shut. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Gareth from Southern Ridge stood. Queen Lyra, he said formally, on behalf of the council, I apologize. We should have investigated these discrepancies years ago. We allowed corruption to flourish because confronting it was uncomfortable. You've done what we were too cowardly to do. Other alphas rose, adding their voices to his. Not all of them. There were still wolves who resented her, who saw her as a disruptive force. But enough. Enough that the balance had finally, irrevocably shifted. After the session adjourned, Lyra escaped to the royal gardens, needing air and space away from the political theater. She found a bench overlooking the mountains, watching the sunset paint the snow-capped peaks in shades of amber and rose. You did well today, Ronan said, appearing beside her. He'd changed from his formal robes back to simpler clothes, looking more like the man she'd bonded than the king who'd just executed political justice. I ended a man's life as he knew it, Lyra said quietly. Destroyed his reputation, his status, everything he'd built. He tried to murder dozens of wolves to protect his ability to steal from his own people. You stopped him. Ronan sat beside her, taking her hand. Don't second-guess that. I'm not. Lyra struggled for words. 3 months ago, I couldn't even stand up to pack bullies. Now I'm taking down corrupt alphas in front of the entire council. It feels surreal. You were always capable of this. You just needed the power to back up your convictions. He squeezed her hand. You've changed the court, Lyra, made it into something better. The old guard is terrified because they can't control you, can't predict you, can't make you into what they want you to be. Good, Lyra said, and meant it. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and stars began emerging in the darkening sky. Lyra felt the bond between them pulsing steady and strong, not the desperate connection forged in crisis, but something deeper, partnership built through trial and proven through fire. "What happens now?" she asked eventually. "Now we rebuild. Northern Ridge needs a new alpha, someone trustworthy who won't continue Matthias's corruption. The healing centers need final implementation, and you," Ronan pulled her closer, "need to stop working yourself to exhaustion and actually enjoy being queen occasionally. Enjoy it how? However you want. That's the beauty of being powerful. You get to define your own role." Lyra considered that. For so long, she'd been reactive, responding to threats, proving herself, fighting for legitimacy. But maybe Ronan was right. Maybe it was time to actually build something instead of just defending her right to exist. "I want to expand the healing initiative," she said, "not just centers, but actual education. Train new healers properly instead of the apprenticeship system that leaves huge gaps in knowledge. Do it. And I want to establish legal protections for lower-ranked wolves. Too many packs treat anyone below warrior status as disposable. That needs to change. Draft the policies. I'll support them." "Just like that?" "Just like that," Ronan smiled. "You're my queen, Lyra. Your vision for the territories is as valid as mine. More valid, actually, since you've lived at the bottom of the hierarchy and understand what needs fixing." The next months passed in a blur of reform and reconstruction. Lyra threw herself into building the system she'd envisioned. Healer academies in each territory, legal codes protecting vulnerable wolves, oversight committees to prevent the kind of corruption Matthias had embodied. Not everyone welcomed the changes. There were protests, resistance, even a few attempted challenges that Ronan shut down with brutal efficiency. But slowly, incrementally, the territories began shifting towards something better. The healing academies opened to their first students 6 months after Matthias's arrest. Lyra attended every opening ceremony, watching young wolves, many from lower-ranked families who'd never had opportunities before, step into roles that could change their entire lives. "This is because of you," one student said shyly after the Eastern Plains ceremony. "You showed us that where you start doesn't determine where you end up." Lyra thought about that later, standing in the academy she'd built on the ruins of the old system. The girl she'd been would never have imagined this, would never have believed she could go from frontier healer to queen, from nothing to someone who shaped the future of 5 territories. But she had. Because when forced to choose between breaking and transforming, she'd chosen transformation. And in doing so, she'd transformed everything around her. The anniversary of her bonding to Ronan arrived with little fanfare. They'd been so busy with reforms and reconstruction that the date almost slipped past unnoticed. But Marcus, ever the organizer, planned a private celebration, just the 3 of them and a few trusted advisors, no court politics or formal ceremony. "To 1 year of you two being insufferably perfect together," Marcus toasted, his grin taking the edge off the words. "We're not perfect," Lyra protested. "You survived assassination attempts, political conspiracies, and reforming an entire governmental structure. That's pretty close." Marcus raised his glass higher. "Seriously, though, thank you both for making this court into something I'm actually proud to serve." They drank to that. Later, after the others had left and only Ronan and Lyra remained, they returned to the gardens where they'd sat after Matthias's downfall. 1 year, Ronan mused. Feels like longer. "Feels like yesterday," Lyra countered. "I can still remember standing in that clearing, watching you kneel and ask me to bond with you. I thought I was dreaming. You almost said no. I almost ran away screaming." She laughed at the memory. "But I'm glad I didn't." "So am I." Ronan pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. "You've exceeded every expectation, shattered every assumption, and proven that the best queens aren't born into the role. They're forged by surviving what should have destroyed them." Lyra leaned into him, feeling the bond between them humming with contentment. She thought about the girl she'd been, wolfless, powerless, convinced she was broken. That girl would be amazed by who she'd become. But maybe she'd also recognize something fundamental. Because even when Lyra had nothing, even when she was being crushed under the weight of pack rejection and Kael's betrayal, she'd never actually stopped fighting, never truly given up. The strength had always been there. She'd just needed the right catalyst to reveal it. "I love you," she said quietly. "I don't think I've said that enough." Ronan's arms tightened. "I love you too, though I probably should have mentioned it before bonding you for life." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the gardens and fading into the mountain air. A year and a half after her bonding, Lyra stood before the assembled council once more. But this time, there were no accusations to make, no corruption to expose. This time, she was presenting the final implementation report for the territorial reforms. "The healing academies are fully operational across all 5 territories," she announced, with waiting lists for next year's classes already at capacity. Legal protections for lower-ranked wolves have been ratified and are being enforced. Financial oversight committees have identified and recovered millions in misappropriated resources. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had once regarded her with suspicion or outright hostility. Now they watched with respect, some with genuine admiration. 2 years ago, I was a frontier healer with no wolf and no future. The system told me I was nothing, would always be nothing, and should be grateful for whatever scraps I was thrown. Her voice remained steady, carrying to every corner of the chamber. But that system was wrong. Not just about me, about every wolf it dismissed, every individual it crushed, every voice it silenced. She met Isidora's eyes, saw the older alpha smile with fierce pride. "We've built something better, not perfect. We still have work to do, still have inequalities to address, still have wolves who resist change. But we've proven that transformation is possible, that power used with compassion instead of cruelty can actually make things better." Gareth stood, followed immediately by Isidora, then the other alphas one by one. The entire council rose in acknowledgement of what she'd accomplished. "Queen Lyra," Gareth said formally, "the council recognizes your achievements and thanks you for your service to the 5 territories. You've earned not just our respect, but our gratitude." The chamber erupted in applause. Real applause this time. Not the polite political gesture, but genuine appreciation. Lyra felt emotion tighten her throat, fought to keep her composure. When the session ended and she finally escaped to the private chambers, she found Ronan waiting with a familiar smile. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Overwhelming, satisfying, terrifying." Lyra sank into a chair. "I've spent 2 years fighting for legitimacy. Now that I have it, I'm not sure what to do next." "Keep building, keep improving, keep being exactly who you are." Ronan moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "The court needs someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless, who fights for wolves who can't fight for themselves. That's always going to be your role." "Our role," Lyra corrected. "I couldn't do this without you." "We make a good team." They did. King and Queen, Alpha and Primal, 2 broken pieces that had found each other and built something stronger than either could have managed alone. That night, Lyra stood at the window of their chambers, looking out over Shadow Peak. The compound had been rebuilt, the fire damage erased, but the changes she'd implemented ran deeper than architecture. She could feel it in the way wolves moved through the courtyards, less fear, more confidence. In the way lower-ranked wolves no longer automatically flinched away from their superiors. In the subtle shift from a hierarchy based purely on power to one that valued contribution and character. "You're thinking too hard," Ronan said from the bed. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. We've come far, but there's still distance to travel." He patted the space beside him, "which you'll be better equipped to handle after sleeping occasionally." Lyra laughed but moved away from the window. As she settled beside Ronan, feeling his warmth and the steady pulse of their bond, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From nothing to queen, from powerless to primal, from broken to unbreakable. The girl they'd called worthless had proven them all wrong. Not through violence or vengeance, but through sheer determination to build something better than what she'd been given. And in doing so, she hadn't just changed her own fate. She'd changed the fate of every wolf who'd ever been told they were nothing. 3 years after her bonding, Lyra returned to Ironpelt one final time. Not for a crisis or emergency, but for the opening of their new healing academy, the last territory to complete its facility. Alpha Garrick greeted her at the border with genuine warmth. "Your Majesty, welcome home." "This isn't home anymore," Lyra said gently. "But thank you." The academy was beautiful, New construction built on the site of the old healing den where Lyra had spent so many years working in isolation. They'd named it after her, despite her protests. The dedication plaque read, Lyra Vane Academy of Healing Arts, because where you start doesn't determine where you finish. We wanted you to know, Garrick said during the opening ceremony, that we understand what we lost when we failed to see your worth. And while we can't undo that failure, we can honor it by ensuring no other wolf in this territory is ever dismissed because they don't fit traditional expectations. Kael was there, standing in the back of the crowd with Sarah beside him. They had children now, 2 pups who played at their feet, oblivious to the history their parents carried. When the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, Kael approached carefully. Lyra, he said, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know, watching what you've built, seeing the wolf you've become. I'm proud of you, even if I have no right to that pride. Lyra looked at the man who'd once been her entire world, felt nothing but distant sympathy for who they'd both been. I hope you're happy, Kael, she said honestly. I hope Sarah and your children give you the life you wanted, and I hope you teach your pups to see value in wolves who don't fit traditional molds, so they don't make the mistakes you made. She walked away before he could respond, not out of cruelty but simple disinterest. He was part of a past she'd moved beyond, a chapter closed and filed away. Ronan waited by their vehicle, his eyes tracking her approach with familiar warmth. Ready to go home? He asked. More than ready? They drove back to Shadow Peak as the sun set, painting the frontier mountains in shades of fire and gold. Lyra watched the landscape pass, thinking about the girl who'd once believed this territory defined her entire existence. That girl had been so small, so convinced her lack of a wolf made her worthless, so desperate for someone else to validate her value. But the woman Lyra had become didn't need validation from anyone. She'd built her worth with her own hands, forged her identity through trial and pain, and ultimately triumph. And in doing so, she'd created a legacy that would outlast any individual, a system where wolves were valued for their character and contribution rather than just their power. You're smiling again, Ronan observed. I earned this smile, Lyra said, every day of it. And she had, through fire and betrayal, through challenges and transformation, through every moment that tried to break her and failed. She'd risen from nothing to reshape an entire civilization. The girl they'd called empty hadn't just filled the void inside herself. She'd used it to build something that would help countless others fill theirs. And that, Lyra thought, as Shadow Peak appeared on the horizon, as Ronan's hand found hers and the bond between them pulsed warm and true, that was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here. The outcast had become the queen. The nothing had become everything. And in the process, she'd proven that the most powerful transformations aren't the ones others impose on you. They're the ones you choose for yourself. Years later, when young wolves asked Queen Lyra how she'd gone from frontier healer to the most influential queen in 5 territories, she always gave the same answer. I stopped letting other people define my worth. I stopped believing that power was the only thing that mattered. And I built something better than what I'd been given. Not for revenge, but because wolves deserved better. Then she'd smile, that fierce expression that still made court politicians nervous, and add, and if I could do it, so can you. Never forget that. Because that was the truth she'd learned through fire and transformation. Power wasn't just about strength or dominance or bloodline. Real power came from refusing to break, from turning pain into purpose, from believing you were worth more than the world said you were. The girl they'd called nothing had become the woman who changed everything. And she'd done it by being exactly, unapologetically, courageously herself.